Indian independence movement, 1947, led by Gandhi's nonviolent resistance. Introduction: the struggle for freedom. The Indian independence movement culminated in 1947 with the end of British colonial rule in India, marking a pivotal moment in global history. The movement was led by a diverse group of leaders, but Mahatma Gandhi became the central figure, championing nonviolent resistance as the primary strategy for challenging British rule. Gandhi's philosophy of ahimsa, nonviolence, and satyagraha, truth force, mobilized millions of Indians to unite in a struggle for independence, leading to the eventual formation of the world's largest democracy. 1. The rise of British colonial rule in India. The British East India Company's rule. The story of British colonialism in India begins in the 17th century with the British East India Company, which initially traded in goods such as cotton, spices, and tea. Over time, the company gained political power and control over vast regions of India, eventually consolidating its authority and turning India into a British colony. By the early 19th century, India was firmly under British control, and the country became known as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire due to its vast resources and economic importance. The Indian Rebellion of 1857. One of the earliest and most significant uprisings against British rule occurred in 1857, known as the Indian Mutiny or First War of Independence. The rebellion was sparked by several factors, including resentment over British military practices, economic exploitation, and religious insensitivity. Though the uprising was ultimately suppressed, it marked the beginning of the nationalist movement and laid the foundation for future resistance against British colonialism. 2. Early movements for Indian nationalism. Formation of the Indian National Congress, Inc. The Indian National Congress, Inc. was founded in 1885 with the aim of increasing Indian participation in governance. Initially, the Inc. sought to address grievances within the British colonial system and push for reforms rather than full independence. However, over time, the Inc.'s objectives shifted toward greater self-rule and eventually full independence, particularly under the leadership of more radical figures like Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Lala Lajpat Rai. The role of early nationalists. Before Gandhi's arrival, early Indian nationalists like Dadabhai Naoroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and Subhas Chandra Bose began demanding reforms and greater political autonomy. Naoroji, often called the Grand Old Man of India, argued that British rule was economically exploiting India, which he referred to as the drain of wealth. However, the demands for self-rule and independence were not as widely embraced at this stage, and many moderates within the Inc. still sought only reforms and greater Indian representation within the colonial system. 3. Gandhi's arrival and the philosophy of nonviolence. Gandhi's early life and influences. Mahatma Gandhi, born in 1869, was initially a lawyer and spent time in South Africa, where he was deeply moved by the racial discrimination faced by Indians there. In South Africa, he developed his philosophy of nonviolent resistance, satyagraha, advocating for peaceful protests to challenge social injustice. Gandhi's experiences in South Africa shaped his belief in ahimsa, nonviolence, which he would later use as the cornerstone of the Indian independence struggle. Gandhi's return to India and rise as a leader. Gandhi returned to India in 1915, where he quickly became a prominent leader of the Indian National Congress. His vision for India was one rooted in self-reliance, social justice, and nonviolence. Gandhi encouraged Indians to boycott British goods, resist British laws, and reject colonial oppression without resorting to violence. His focus on spinning khadi, hand-spun cloth, as a symbol of economic independence and his advocacy for caste equality, especially for the untouchables, galvanized millions across India. 4. The nonviolent resistance campaigns. The non-cooperation movement, 1920 to 1922. One of Gandhi's first major campaigns was the non-cooperation movement, which he launched in 1920. The movement called for Indians to boycott British institutions, including schools, courts, and government offices, as well as British goods. Gandhi's call for nonviolent resistance resonated deeply with the Indian masses, and millions participated in protests, strikes, and boycotts. However, the movement was suspended in 1922 after violence erupted during a protest in Chauri Chaura, where police officers were killed. Gandhi believed that violence undermined the principles of nonviolence, and he called off the movement to prevent further bloodshed. The Salt March, 1930. The Salt March of 1930 became one of Gandhi's most iconic acts of resistance. The British monopoly on salt production and the salt tax placed a heavy burden on poor Indians who could not afford the tax. Gandhi led a 240-mile march from Sabarmati Ashram to the coastal town of Dandi to produce salt from the sea, directly defying British laws. The Salt March drew international attention to the Indian independence struggle and demonstrated the power of nonviolent civil disobedience. The Quit India Movement, 1942. In 1942, as World War II raged on, Gandhi launched the Quit India Movement, calling for an immediate end to British rule in India. The British responded by arresting thousands of Congress leaders, including Gandhi, who was imprisoned for the remainder of the war. Although the movement was brutally suppressed, it sent a clear message that India was no longer willing to tolerate British rule. 5. The Path to Independence. World War II and British weakness. World War II played a significant role in weakening British control over India. The British Empire was exhausted by the war, and the economic strain, coupled with increasing demands for independence from Indian leaders, made it clear that continued colonial rule was unsustainable. The British government, faced with growing unrest, finally agreed to negotiate India's independence. The Partition and Independence, 1947. In 1947, after years of struggle, India finally achieved independence. However, the victory was bittersweet. The country was divided into India and Pakistan, based on religious lines, leading to massive violence and the displacement of millions. The partition of India remains a painful chapter in Indian history, as religious and ethnic tensions flared in the wake of independence. 6. Gandhi's legacy. Gandhi's role in independence. Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance had a profound impact on India's struggle for freedom. His leadership, dedication, and ability to mobilize people from all walks of life were central to India's eventual success in gaining independence. Gandhi's vision of a free India was not only political but also social, advocating for caste equality, religious tolerance, and the upliftment of the poor. His commitment to nonviolence left a lasting mark on global movements for social change, influencing leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and others. Challenges after independence. Despite the monumental victory of independence, the new nation faced immense challenges. The violence and turmoil surrounding the partition left deep scars, and the newly formed government had to contend with issues like poverty, illiteracy, and communal violence. Gandhi's vision of a united, peaceful India remained an ideal that future generations would continue to strive toward. A movement that shaped the world. The Indian independence movement, led by Mahatma Gandhi, remains one of the most remarkable and significant movements in modern history. It was a struggle for freedom that spanned decades, built on the principles of nonviolence, truth, and civil disobedience. Gandhi's leadership not only led to the independence of India in 1947 but also inspired movements for justice and equality around the world. The movement's success in achieving self-rule in the face of an empire was a testament to the power of collective action, moral courage, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948 established global human rights standards. Introduction. The need for global human rights standards. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948, was a groundbreaking document that set forth fundamental human rights that should be universally protected for all people, regardless of nationality, race, gender, or religion. The declaration came in the aftermath of the horrors of World War II, which had exposed the depths of human cruelty and the need for an international commitment to human dignity, freedom, and justice. For the first time in history, a global standard was established to affirm the inherent rights and freedoms of all human beings. 1. The context. The aftermath of World War II. The devastation of World War II. the horrors of World War II left the international community deeply scarred. The war had caused the deaths of over 70 million people, with millions more suffering from displacement, poverty, and trauma. The Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by the Nazi regime, as well as other atrocities like the Nanjing Massacre and the use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, shocked the world into realizing that there had to be a concerted effort to ensure that such violations of human dignity would never be repeated. The formation of the United Nations. In 1945, the United Nations, UN, was founded to promote peace, security, and cooperation among nations after the failure of the League of Nations to prevent the outbreak of World War II. The UN sought to create a world based on the principles of justice, human rights, and mutual respect. As part of its mission, the UN aimed to address the need for universal protections of human rights, which led to the formation of the Commission on Human Rights, CHR, in 1946. 2. The creation of the UDHR. The role of Eleanor Roosevelt. One of the most influential figures in the creation of the UDHR was Eleanor Roosevelt, the widow of U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. As the chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights, Eleanor Roosevelt worked tirelessly to ensure that the Declaration would reflect the universality of human rights. Roosevelt's diplomatic skills and personal conviction played a key role in securing agreement among representatives from different nations and cultures, ensuring that the Declaration would be widely accepted. Drafting the document. The process of drafting the UDHR began in 1946, with representatives from 18 countries working under the Commission on Human Rights. The drafting committee was diverse, with members from different political, cultural, and religious backgrounds, yet they were united by a shared belief in the inherent dignity of all human beings. The UDHR was based on the principles found in various legal traditions and documents, such as the Magna Carta, the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, and the U.S. Bill of Rights, while also drawing on the experiences of those who had suffered under fascist and colonial regimes. After much debate and negotiation, the draft was finalized, and on December 10, 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations formally adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 3. Key principles of the UDHR. Universal rights for all people. The UDHR asserts that all people are entitled to certain rights and freedoms, regardless of their nationality, ethnicity, religion, or other status. These rights are inalienable, meaning they cannot be taken away, and they are equal for all individuals. The UDHR emphasizes the right to dignity, stating that all individuals are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The right to life, liberty, and security. One of the most fundamental principles outlined in the UDHR is the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Article 3 of the UDHR states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. But this article rejects the arbitrary detention or execution of individuals, emphasizing that no one should be subjected to torture or inhuman treatment. The right to equality before the law. The UDHR declares that all individuals are entitled to equal protection of the law. Article 7 states that all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. This article guarantees that no one should face discrimination based on race, sex, religion, or any other status, promoting the ideal of equality and justice for all. The right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. The UDHR affirms that every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Article 18 specifically grants individuals the right to choose their religion and practice it freely, a crucial aspect of individual freedom and dignity. This principle advocates for the freedom to hold personal beliefs without fear of persecution or discrimination. The right to free expression and participation. Freedom of speech, expression, and assembly are central components of the UDHR. Article 19 states, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. The UDHR also emphasizes the right to participate in government, ensuring that individuals can express their opinions and engage in the political process. Article 21 declares that everyone has the right to participate in the government of their country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. 4. Global significance and impact. A universal standard for human rights. The adoption of the UDHR in 1948 was a monumental achievement, establishing a universal standard of human rights for the first time in history. The Declaration serves as a moral guide for governments and societies worldwide, urging them to recognize and respect the fundamental rights of individuals. While the UDHR is not a legally binding document, it has served as the foundation for international human rights law and has inspired numerous treaties, conventions, and national constitutions that further safeguard human rights. The formation of human rights law. The UDHR was followed by the development of several international treaties aimed at protecting human rights. These include the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICESCR, both adopted by the UN in 1966. These covenants, along with the UDHR, form the backbone of the international human rights framework, which holds countries accountable for the treatment of their citizens and residents. The UDHR and international advocacy. Since its adoption, the UDHR has played a critical role in the work of human rights organizations, such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and in the actions of international courts like the International Criminal Court, ICC. The UDHR has also been a key point of reference for social justice movements around the world, inspiring efforts to combat racism, gender inequality, child labor, and refugee rights. The document has helped give rise to global movements for women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, disability rights, and the fight against torture and unlawful detention. 5. Challenges and criticisms. The tension between universalism and cultural relativism. While the UDHR seeks to establish universal standards for human rights, it has faced criticism from some quarters. Critics argue that the UDHR's standards may not always align with the cultural, religious, or political norms of every country. This has led to debates between universalism, the idea that all human rights are universally applicable, and cultural relativism, the idea that rights should be defined by local cultures and traditions. Some countries have argued that certain rights, particularly those related to freedom of expression and gender equality, may conflict with traditional practices or religious beliefs. The struggle for implementation. While the UDHR has had a profound impact on global discourse around human rights, ensuring its principles are implemented consistently remains a challenge. Many countries still face issues with human rights violations, such as freedom of speech restrictions, discrimination, and injustice against marginalized groups. Despite the Declaration's moral weight, enforcing these rights in practice remains an ongoing struggle, with both governments and international organizations working to hold violators accountable. 6. Legacy and continuing importance. A milestone in human progress. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights remains one of the most significant achievements in global history. It represents humanity's shared commitment to dignity, equality, and freedom, offering a foundation for the protection of human rights worldwide. The UDHR continues to inspire individuals, governments, and organizations working to promote justice and human flourishing across the globe. A living document. Though it was created in 1948, the principles laid out in the UDHR continue to be relevant today. The challenges of inequality, discrimination, refugee crises, and environmental degradation remind us that the work of upholding human rights is never complete. The UDHR is a living document, a tool that empowers humanity to build a world where everyone's rights are protected, no matter their background or circumstances. A global commitment to human dignity. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was a bold vision for a world where justice and dignity prevail for all individuals. In the face of the atrocities of war and oppression, the UDHR offered a beacon of hope for a better, more equitable future. Today, it remains a cornerstone of global human rights efforts, reminding us that every individual, regardless of where they live, is entitled to fundamental rights and freedoms that uphold their dignity and humanity.